Hello, everyone. Welcome to another podcast by Plant Care for Beginners. This is the podcast where I talk about my personal experience with houseplants and how you can actually make it easier to take care of your plants. Because taking care of plants is not actually as difficult as you might think it is. It is much easier if you have a couple of handy tips. So let's highlight some of those tips. In this episode, we're going to look at watering plants. There's obviously a lot of different types of plants. Some plants need a lot of water, other plants might not need as much water. So let's look at the top tips that you can use to see if your plant needs to be watered. First, you need to check the soil. Why do you need to do this? Well, because if the soil is wet and your plant is a plant that doesn't like to be in wet soil for that long, you don't have to water your plant yet. Because if you water your plant in wet soil, it's only going to get soggy and it's going to drown the plant. That's when root rot happens, for example. So you want to check the soil for moisture before you water your plants. You have to do this every time. At some point, you do get a little bit handy with this. You actually start to recognize patterns. You start to see, okay, so maybe it takes 10 days for this plant, or maybe this takes 2 weeks. But for the very first few weeks, maybe even months, you want to check the soil every time before you water a plant until you start to get a little better at guessing. So how do you do this? You take a finger and you stick it about 2 centimeters or 1 inch into the soil. And then if you take your finger back out and moisture, you can feel the moisture, then it's definitely moist still. But if the soil sticks to your finger and it doesn't really get off that easily, if you wipe it away, then it's still moist enough and you don't have to water your plant yet. However, if the soil falls off really easily, it's definitely time to water your plant because it's dry at that point. It doesn't really matter too much when you water your plants during the day. I usually do this during the afternoon, but perhaps it is a bit better to do it during the morning or evening. It's a bit like watering your garden. You don't want to water during hot afternoons because all the water evaporates right away. It's not as much of an issue with houseplants because they're protected by windows, they're inside, so the evaporation is not as extreme, but it's whatever is easiest for you. When you water your plants, you will want to think about drainage as well. It's very important for some plants, like succulents or cacti, to have a drainage hole at the bottom of the pot. This drainage hole is there for a reason. It's because the soil will hold on to some moisture for your plant. For succulents and cacti, it's not a whole lot. It basically goes right through to the bottom of the pot. And that's what a drainage hole is for, because you want to get rid of that water from the pot as soon as possible. Because one of the biggest causes of root rot is standing water. Your plant doesn't like to stand in standing water, so you want to get rid of as much of that water as quickly as possible. Sometimes you will have a saucer under your pot, and after watering your plant, you'll see some water collect there. So what you want to do is you want to wait 5 to 10 minutes. Then if you see water collecting in the saucer, get rid of that water. Because if you leave the water there, you don't use the full function of the drainage hole because the water is still staying there. And then one last thing that's pretty important is watering differently throughout the seasons. This might sound a little strange, but plants do actually feel seasons as well. Because during the spring and summer, there's a lot more sunlight, which means your plant grows quicker, but the moisture also evaporates more quickly because the sun is warmer. So you'll have to water your plant a little bit more often as well. And then when it's turning to fall, the days are getting shorter, it's getting cooler. There doesn't really happen that much evaporation, and also your plants are slowly going to go dormant, which means they don't grow as quickly, so they don't need as much water. And during the winter, yeah, you can definitely see a difference because the days are very dark. There's not a lot of sun. It's cold. There's not a lot of heat from the sun on your plant. And your plant usually doesn't grow during the winter at all. So you'll need to water it a lot less. So in the very beginning, it might seem a little bit difficult to find out when your plant needs to be watered. You have tools like moisture meters, but I've personally found 2 techniques really interesting and really helpful, really. The first one is checking the soil moisture with your finger. It's actually really effective. As easy as it sounds, it's super effective because you can instantly feel if the soil is dry or if it's Still good for a couple of days. The second one is actually lifting the pot with the plant in it. This does take a little bit of extra practice because you'll need to know the weight of the pot right after you've watered it, because then it feels heavier. If you lift the pot and the soil is really dry, you'll feel that the pot and the plant are really light. Again, this does take a bit of practice, but I found this to be one of the most effective ways to see if your plant needs to be watered or not. Especially your tropical plants are really good with this. If you're interested in finding out more about watering, I will link a couple of other guides that I've written before on my website, and you can find more information there. I'm also happy to help you out if you have any questions. You can reach out to me through my website or through email, maybe even social media. You can direct message me there. I'll be happy to answer your questions there as well. If you have any questions about specific plans, definitely don't hesitate to reach out as well. I'd be happy to help you out with those. Maybe I've already written a guide for it. Maybe I still need to write a guide for it. Just let me know what you need help with. I'm happy to help and make you feel more confident about taking care of plants. So thank you for listening. And in the next episode, we're going to look at pests. And I hope to see you back again for that one.